All right, then. Just a brief introduction from my perspective. Yesterday was amazing, and I just wanted to share the first time that I heard something that I later learned had to do a lot with Balkan music in throughout the Balkans and Turkey. And that is, I was 16 years old in high school, and I was exploring playing piano in a big band jazz group. I mean, like 40 kids, 35, 40 kids. I mean, it was just an amazing environment. And I was learning about all the major sevenths, minor sevenths, diminished chords, all of those things. Okay, and I'm just playing around the keyboard, and all of a sudden I play. It's just symmetrical. It goes from D, E flat, F sharp, G, and then A, B flat, C sharp, D. So I asked my high school mentor, hey, this isn't a melodic minor. It's not. I mean, what scale is this anyway? And he posed a couple of things, but nothing really fit, And I was still curious, but I just loved that. And I even played that modal seventh, if you know what that is. It just sounded right to me. 16 years old in high school. So then I get to my first folk dance class my freshman year in college, and there are many reasons that I wound up doing that, but then I hear music like this on Gaida, and I'm just, what? What? I know that. I know that scale. At that point, I began to learn that it's a maqam, and it's that kind of thing that just really attracted me. So now, let's get to the first panel here. And I'm hoping, real life happens, the impingement of reality and all. But I'm hoping in this first session that we'll be able to hear from Henry Goldberg, Alan Zemmel, Dan Kolar, Iran Frankel, Carol Freeman, Jerry Kisslinger, and Dave Shockett. So I'd actually like to start with Henry, I think. And Henry in the Boston area, he was involved with Mandala and many other things that were going on, but really the focus of the first few sessions is really about how you got started. Were you a musician, classical musician or whatever, and then how did Balkan and beyond, let's say, music actually enter your life, and why did you become passionate about it, such that for the rest of your life, it was right here? Henry?
Can you hear me?
I hear your dulcet tones clearly.
Okay, very good. Well,
may we see you too?
I can see me. Can you see me?
You'll pop up on the screen as you keep talking, Henry, if your camera's on.
Okay, thanks, Anthony.
My camera is on. I can see me.
Okay, there's a little bit of a delay. Okay.
Anyway.
There's that beautiful beard.
So I guess I was introduced to music by my grandfather, who played accordion every day. And so I was introduced to Russian and Yiddish songs. And I was voluntold to play the anniversary waltz when I was 4.
Voluntold, huh?
So, but I had a toy drum that he broke playing his part too enthusiastically, and he bought me a beautiful snare drum when I was 4, which I never played. But anyway, I suppose I was introduced. My mother liked to sing, so we sang in the car all the time. Not too much international music, but in the 60s, like so many other people, I heard the Penny Whistlers on the radio singing Shtomie Milo, and I love that. And also that was in 1967, as part of a Hebrew school project, we were performing the song Joshua Yehoshua, which was a 6-Day War song. And I was handed a doumbek and told, play. So I had to play. That was my introduction to percussion. I didn't really get into Balkan dancing so much until I went to Brandeis in 1969 and was tutored in Balkan dancing for a while by Sarada George, who was there also, and Erica Zisman. And I made it to MIT folk dancing in 1970. My first dance was Ludo Copano. So in 1973, I moved into Cambridge, joined the Mandala Folk Ensemble, as you mentioned. And in 1974, I was handed an old decrepit tapan and told, play. And for an after party with the Tammies. So, and my first dance that I had, the song I had to play was Postupano. So I didn't have good luck with these first pieces. So in 1974, David Bilitis and Janice Darling went to Europe and came back with a bunch of traditional Balkan instruments because David wanted to start a band. So in 1975, we had our first gig as a band, the band Evonas. And we were the first group in the area to play dance music on these weird traditional instruments. And we
thank you, Henry. Thank you, Henry, very, very much. And talking about once the band starts, you'll be back in that session. And actually, I've asked you to be in every session because in terms of in the Boston area, when I talk to many, many people, you are the archive for basically everybody who's ever played music in Boston, at least from the early days through yesterday, at least last week, maybe.
I think that might be an exaggeration, but I'll be happy to answer any question.
Then I'm living up to my reputation, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so it's fine with me if I'm not on screen, but I'm a little confused if the person that's talking is supposed to show up on screen, and I made the multi-speaker choice.
Well, what's going to happen is you're on speaker view, so what's going to happen is other people are on mixed view, and what they'll see is people will pop up on screen as they talk and then disappear after they're done talking.
Okay, so multi-speaker is what I should have. So I just want to be sure I can see anybody who's talking.
Speaker, if you click on your view button in your upper right corner of your Zoom window,
yep,
you choose multi-speaker.
Yep, that's what I had.
There may be a delay from a second to 20 seconds on getting someone up.
Okay, so no worries.
Zoom is controlling that, not us. That's why the delay.
Thank you, Holly.
Yeah, you can tell me that, Holly, but and I believe you. I'm sorry. I joke, or I tend to. Yeah, you know who I am. Is Alan Zemmel here? He was
He's not here.
Okay. Dan Kolar?
Dan is here.
All right, Dan.
Dan?
Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for having me, first of all.
Hi, Dan.
Wonderful. Hi,
Dan,
everyone.
So glad to see you.
I have a different experience, definitely, from most everyone, including Henry. My ethnic background, Slovak and Lithuanian, and from the coal regions of Pennsylvania. I just grew up at church picnics, hearing chardashes and Slovak and some Lithuanian music, polkas, things of that nature. And then when the mines closed, my family, immediate family, moved down to a German area outside Lansdale, Pennsylvania, and we rarely got back upstate for events. So I was in sort of a musical desert, to my mind anyway. So I relied upon going out to record shops and looking and searching for different kinds of music. And one of my favorite early records was Turkish. And then I went into...
Sorry to interrupt, Dan. Why were you looking for other musics?
Because of just a basic interest of beyond the American music scene.
There we go. Thank you.
But I didn't even know what I was looking for until I found it. Okay, I'm gonna jump quickly ahead. That one of the records I found was of Indian music with a Shania, and it was like that sound was just absolutely mind-boggling to me, as was the Turkish music, but it was the Chalgian music that I heard. And it was, I'm going to jump way ahead now, college years. I was working summertime for a glass muralist who had a Ukrainian workman who said, "Oh, you like that kind of music, so go up to the art museum in Philadelphia. They do that dancing there." So I went up to, so after work, I went up to the Philadelphia Art Museum, and there was this wonderful folk dance group. And I heard all this other music that I had been, it just expanded my brain. Again, jumping fast forward, the people that I connected with there, the friendliness, etc., was just absolutely wonderful. Said, "Well, you like that Balkan stuff? Why don't you go out to Penn and their folk dancing?" Well, I did, and it was like, oh my God, people who know what a pierogi is and vodka. It was like I felt like I was home. It was wonderful. Jumping ahead again, people from the Penn folk dancing said, "Well, you're up outside Philadelphia. Why don't you go to Princeton folk dancing?" So again, moving fast forward here, I was folk dancing in Princeton and folk dancing in Philadelphia, and introduced to, well, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. When I heard Zorlas and Tapan, whoa, that's all I could say. Now, jumping ahead again, I met people who were musicians, both in Princeton and Philadelphia. And that evolved into, I mean, I was not a musician in any way, shape, or form, but I loved the drum. And I loved the Zorlas and Shania. I mean, that reed instrument just resonated with me. And I just thought, like, I really want to delve into that. And luckily enough, I was able to connect with other musicians who played other instruments. Alan Zemmel was one of them with the Philadelphia Balalaika Orchestra. There were people who expanded beyond the Russian music, as Alan has to this day. And in Princeton, I got to be a little more connected to Jim Finn, who was playing recorder, and Jay Maynard was playing a banjo. And I happened to buy a drum at a junk shop. So we started playing Macedonian music. And the same thing kind of in Philadelphia. It just expanded, and it was wonderful. It was the camaraderie, the connection, the music, the food, parties, absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
That's it.
Yep. Thanks so much, Dan. And sorry, was there a question?
It's Sherry. It's Sherry. I just wanted to thank Dan for teaching me Tapan in 1979 at Balkan Camp, West Coast.
I'm glad.
Excellent.
It was a transformative experience.
Thank you, Sherry.
Yes, indeed. All right. So is Iran Frankel here?
Iran is not here.
Carol Freeman?
Carol's here.
Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
So my story is probably pretty similar to that of many of us in the community. Can you not hear me?
Can you turn it up a little? Or get a
Turn
little
up or get closer to your mic.
Yeah, so my mother started folk dancing when I was 8. She played all sorts of music in the house. And I started going to the Hermans. A lot of us in the community danced at the folk dance house with Michael and Marianne Hermans. I started going when I was 14, and it was kind of a counterculture thing to do, was to go folk dancing. And in 1968, I started singing with Carol Silverman. We just sort of started playing around. And at the same time, Lauren Brody and Karen DeVries, they had also been singing. Then in about 1970, there was a dance group formed by Marty Koenig in New York. And there were 13 women, and we sang. And that 13 women kept singing. Well, actually, we were whittled down to 8 people. We kept singing after the dance group stopped. And then we wheeled down to 5 to 4 to 3 to 2. And we were in Ženska Pesna. Ultimately became Ženska Pesen. We switched from Macedonian to a Bulgarian name. One thing I should say about what we were doing is that we were singing village music. People said, you need to be singing arranged music. I said, no, the penny whistlers are already doing that. We want to sing what we like. And so we did. And the other thing I should say about us is that we did a lot of performance work outside of the folk dance community. We did a lot of concerts and festivals for the American folk music community. So sure, and it was an amazing time in the 70s. There were like we would get like hundreds and hundreds of people at every concert, which is kind of extraordinary. That would never happen now, except aside from Golden Festival. And what else should I say? I think that's probably it.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Is that we did this with Nova Sela a lot, and especially with Alan for many decades, actually. So there was.
Yeah, I definitely want to. I want to come back to that in the post band section. Carol, thank you so much for being here and for sharing some of that history. Jerry Kisslinger.
Jerry is here.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Hi, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm going to speak about the East Coast experience that is in famous East Coast places like St. Louis and Boulder, Colorado, because that's where I started. I have been in New York for 50 years, but it started a little bit before that. So it started with folk dancing in University City, Missouri, a group that John Ullman is still part of. And I was a very young, seventh grader going to folk dancing. And I was also, Friday nights was folk dancing and Saturday nights was soul music. And I was in a soul band and already drumming. And so, when I moved to Colorado between 9th and 10th grade, I found an incredibly vibrant folk dance scene in Boulder at the time. And I immediately could move into a social, this is familiar to those of us who were all in those days. It was such a scene. Within a week, I was folk dancing with people. Within another week, I was swimming at the reservoir where we weren't supposed to be swimming and, that kind of thing. The St. Louis experience, I would say, included a little bit, my grandfather was from what's now Romania. It was Austria-Hungary. I think I was hungry for reconnecting, no pun intended, connecting back, but he was Jewish. I played Martin Koenig's record, which I'd gotten from a folk dance friend, thinking that he would be nostalgic, and he just told me to take that fellow out of his misery. But I think there was an attempt to connect to some old country roots for me, and I think that's a common thread for a lot of the early generation of Balkan musicians. I moved to Boulder, and the scene, there was some really important context there. And I started with the Boulder International Folk Dancers, and there was a dance troupe called Narodno. I'm sorry,
We'll take care of it.
Okay. There was a dance troupe called Narodno. I have pictures of all this stuff, but I didn't send them in. With Jim Levita, many of you know, and Joe Miller and some other folks. And so I was, as a 16-year-old, kind of similar to Henry, they put a drum in my hand and say, go play Chifta Chamcha and Kalajisko, and don't play the downbeat until we land. So that was my first training, was to learn how to think about time outside of meter. And so Narodno was an entry level for me, along with a band that was playing on Wednesday nights for folk dancing at a restaurant called the Acropolis. So, I'd been in gyms doing dancing to records, and then we went to the Acropolis, and all of a sudden it was a live band and a lot of fun to folk dance to. And before long, I turned a drum sideways, a floor tom sideways, and started playing along with them. And by the time I was 16 or 17, I was gigging with what we called at the time the Boulder Folk Dance Orchestra, which included John Cockinen on clarinet and Dave Morton on accordion, and a guy named Bob Johnson on guitar. And we played for Greek picnics. We would go to St. Sava's in Denver. We played for Vitz Belias, who was definitely a folk dance factor in the neighborhood. We played for Viltus magazine parties. I just am painting a picture of the inputs that made it so exciting to think about that. So I started playing as a high school student, both within ethnic communities and folk dance communities, even while I was in a band called Leroy and the Lugnuts.
Thank you, Jared.
Leroy. We were all Lugnuts.
I get it, Jared.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Is that an oud on your wall now?
It is.
Since when?
Well, it's on the wall, Bill. You'll notice. I want to say, can I just add one thing about Boulder? Ingvar Sodal was there as well, and that was inspiring. And so, my first paid gig was for the Sons of Norway, because you need a trap set drummer if you're going to play Norwegian music.
Wow. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful story. Get back to you in a bit. Dave Goldberg?
Dave's here.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, and I want to, Dave, a little bit of an intro. So Dave has experience both on the West Coast with Aman as well as the East Coast. And because he and Henry had a gig last night, they couldn't participate in the West Coast panel yesterday. So Dave, feel free to speak to any place on the continent, okay?
Well, I started dancing, I'll say the West Coast, but it was the West Coast of Lake Michigan in Chicago. And I was in school, and I had a roommate. I played clarinet, but just like classical music, and not very well. And I had a roommate who danced with a little performing group, and they decided they wanted to have live music. So I started playing with them, and that was Balkanski Igri. And it still exists, at least it existed until John Quo passed away. I hope they're still doing it. John Quo did great stuff. And so I played clarinet. Somehow I ended up playing Zorla. God knows what else I was playing with them. Part of my particular history, which maybe is a little different from other people, is I got so much involved in making instruments and screwing around with instruments. When we first started doing this stuff, like Bulgaria was like this white space on the map, here'd be strange beasts and so on. And so we'd have these instruments from, we didn't know garbage about these damn things. And so part of my experience was learning to handle these things. And that's what I am now, as an instrument maker. Okay, so what else do you want to know? So I played in Chicago, and we really mixed the Serbian community. There was I remember going out to this Macedonia thing in the Macedonian church in South Bend, Indiana, and Alexander Sarajevsky was singing there. I mean, it was just a heady experience, in retrospect. And okay, what else do I say? When I got out to California, I was in San Diego. There was a little bit of folk dance group. They said, "Oh, there's this performance up somewhere north of there. There's not much America south of San Diego." And I went up, and that was Alman, and that's Mark Levy play. Oh yeah, Mark was in Balkanski Igru when I was in Chicago also. And so I said, "Oh, that's Mark playing," and I remember saying, "Oh, and it sounds like he's been practicing too." Yeah. So is that enough, or you want to go on?
So Dave, I got to call you out here. You said you just kind of sort of wound up playing Zurla. Could you say a little bit? I mean, it wasn't easy to find an instrument. Maybe Nestor helped you connect, or
No. This was long before Nestor. This was in Chicago, and
Wow.
I don't remember the details of how we had these instruments, how we got reeds. Zurla reeds is like, oh, yeah, everybody who's ever had any experience with these things is rolling their eyes. Zurla reeds, Zurla reeds. Now I only play clarinet. It's so nice to play an instrument that I can buy reeds. If there's any problem with the instrument, I take it over to a professional who fixes it. None of these strange things, and none of these instruments that people listen to and say, "What the hell is that?" I'm tired of that. Yeah,
Well, I don't know if you remember, but I have to tell you thank you. I mean, there was a time that Aman was in the Bay Area,
yeah.
and I had a Macedonian Gaida, and it wasn't working very well. I think it might have been the one that I actually got from Richard Mayhew, who was trying to just create Macedonian and Bulgarian Gaidas like from pictures. He didn't know. I mean, he heard the records and he tried to recreate them with Naga hide bags. And anyway, you really,
You didn't
yeah.
have to worry about killing a naga just to get the hide.
Well, you really got that pipe working. You made a reed for me that lasted for years, buddy. Thank you.
Okay. We'll talk more later. Okay.
Okay, so let's keep moving around so we get everybody on board. But thank you for those stories and those memories. And Drew Harris,
Hey,
maybe Drew and Lane could weigh in at the same time. But is Drew here? Lane here?
yeah.
They're here.
So I'm going to start by saying the things I kind of sketched out, some things I kind of wanted to share, and it wasn't necessarily chronology, although I'll tell some of that chronologically. But my passion, I'm going to start at the end, is about the dialogue between dancers and musicians, about the passion, the sharing, and so. I came to the music the usual way. I played football, I took ballet, I took a college course that led to a social group, and that was great fun. I was 16, I was a sophomore in college, and meeting older women who liked me. It was good. Early on in the dancing, I'd probably been 2 months dancing, we went to a Greek festival. And that was the first time I heard live music, folk music, and it was beautiful watching the interaction, particularly with the old guys, with the musicians. And you could, the musicians played for those guys, and they danced for the musicians. And so
it was also the first time we ever saw money thrown on musicians. Like, holy shit!
Yeah, and then
They
couple
would
months
come out
later,
with a push broom to sweep the tips up.
Yeah, well, and so. I'm not sure exactly the chronology, but Lane and I were in New Orleans as young guys and wandering around, and I think it was at the corner of Iberville and Burgundy. We heard Greek music, and it turned out there was a bar on the second floor, and we went up, and not very many people were dancing, but we started dancing, and then the band started asking us what we want, and so we shared whatever half a dozen Greek dances we knew, and at the break, the synthesizer player said, wanted to know more. And when he found out we were folk dancing, he said, "Oh, I'm Bulgarian." And he started playing Rechenitsa and all this shit. It was really fun, and that was this kind of again the dynamic where somebody was playing music for us, and getting a charge out of it. So I'm going to fast forward again to 1973. So, Lane and I had started a club at the college. That summer, we hitchhiked. Oh, and we had a workshop. We probably had Bora by then, Bora Uskok and play. And so Zorla, holy shit. And, a lot of energy. And then that summer, we hitchhiked out to California, Lane and I, from Pensacola, Florida. And while we were there, we went up to Stanford Folk Dancing. I think it was a Sunday afternoon outdoors. There were like 200 plus people in a courtyard dancing. It was mind-blowing. And towards the end, there was a group playing. And I think for me, that was like, I could do that. We could do that. Lane was already drumming. He'll probably. I'm going to give a little outline. He'll elaborate. But so we started playing. And we were awful, but we were the only people in the Southeast who were playing this music live. And we were a folk dance jukebox band. So we played for, earlier on, we played Israeli dances, English country dances, Balkan dances, all this stuff. And so I'm going to fast forward to 1976, which is another pivotal moment. We got invited to play at a workshop in Austin, and Bob Liebman and Larry Weiner were teaching it. And Lane and I and our violin player, Steve Sheets, got out there early, a couple of days early.
Put a context on this, too, that whole workshop was centered around a mock Serbian wedding. So it's a 3-day mapped out thing, and we were the band.
Yeah, so we go, there's a local, Franklin Houston was local accordion player, so the four of us played, and Bob came and like coached us about how he wanted. Jerry was talking about that stretched out time in between meters. Well, Bob wanted us to do that, so he was trying to get us to understand it, and I think Lane and I got it faster than Franklin did, but it was good. And then the whole weekend was this master class in interaction between music and dancing, and it was magical, and so that changed how we played some, and it really resonated in the thing that we do now is communicating with dancers. I'm gonna fast forward, move to New York. Yeah.
Anyway, so we're trying to make sure everybody gets some time, and we will be back with the two of you.
Okay, sure.
But we got to keep moving things along. Great stories, so much in common.
Lane probably
that
wants to
vibe
answer.
between the dancers and the musicians. Okay, is Jane Sugarman here?
No, Jane's not here.
Oh,
I'm here.
Oh, I didn't see you earlier. My fault.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. So yeah,
welcome, Jane.
I'm another bi-coastal person because my first 40 years of my life were on the West Coast, and then I moved to the East Coast.
Yep.
So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and before I was born, my parents folk danced in San Francisco at Chang's and with a woman named Madeline Green. But when I was little, we moved to Berkeley, and my parents stopped dancing. But my father played me. He loved music, and he played me recordings from all over the world. And I remember there was one Croatian tamburica piece that I think I was 2 or something. I just really, really liked that. And then when I was in high school, I was living in Palo Alto. We were living in Palo Alto. And I was studying piano, and I was playing lots of Bartok pieces and, settings of Hungarian dances and Romanian dances. And a friend and I went to the Stanford Student Union to go see a foreign film. And I heard this Hungarian music coming from out on the deck. And I went out and looked, and it was a tune that I knew. It was Lakodalmitans, which I'd played an arrangement of. And I just couldn't believe that people were dancing to this music. I was so excited. And so I didn't start going right away because I was doing the film thing on Friday nights. But I guess the summer before my senior year of high school, I just started going on Friday nights. And there were 2 other friends from high school. We went. And right away, I zeroed in on the Balkan dances. I mean, this was international folk dancing. But right away, I really loved the Balkan things. And this was 1967. So it was this period when Yves Moreau was coming and giving workshops, and Marty Koenig, and there was kind of Balkan fever. So and then in the fall, my parents and I went to the Kolo Festival, and I can't believe this now when I think about it. I saw West Wind, and they performed a dance from Kosovo, which is where I now do research. They did what Albanians called Valjeru Govas. And I just thought this was the most fantastic thing I'd ever seen. They really did a very nice job of it, I have to say. And I just thought, I want to do this. I want to be in this group. So I joined Westwind. I think Alex Cordray and I were probably the 2 high school students in there at the time. And then sometime within the next year, suddenly every high school kid in Palo Alto was going to Stanford folk dancing. It just became a thing. And one day this guy came up. I think I was taking requests for dances, and he had a whole list of dances that he wanted to request, and it was Steve Katansky. and I'd never seen him before. And I thought, who is this guy? How does he know all these dances? And so he started coming, and some of his other friends from high school. He has always said we went to different high schools together because Palo Alto had 3 high schools. So I met him, and I met Heidi Boding, who's up in Radost in Seattle for many years, and Jody Gilbert, who lives in Amsterdam. And they joined Westwind, and so we all went to Westwind together. And at some point, I realized that all these dances that I was learning that I really loved were men's dances. They were things like Rudokopano and Kopachka and really, really hard dances, that's why I was interested in them, because they were very intricate and the rhythms were really interesting. But I got it in my head, no, what the women do is they sing. So I decided I really would like to know how to do the singing. And in Westwind, we were doing La Darke. And when I think about it, this was really like the deaf leading the deaf. Like none of us had any model of how to sing like that. We didn't have Nena Shocic, what was her name? Skocic? From, that Amon had. We had no one to model our singing after. And we were all trying to figure out how to sing like that. And eventually I came up with something. And so they had me do the solo in La Darke. And that sort of got me going. And then eventually Jody and Heidi and I started singing together. And Neil Sandler gave us the name Tri de Voce, which means 3 girl. It's totally ungrammatical name, but we were Tri de Voce. And we sang at the Renaissance Fair, and we sang at the Dickens Fair, and we did mostly Kutev arrangements and Croatian songs from Lado. And but that was the beginning. Until I went off in 1974, I went off to UCLA and started studying ethnomusicology, and that was a new chapter. So I can wait till we go through the second round at this point.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you very much for those wonderful stories, and I look forward to you coming back a bit later. Is Michael Ginsberg here?
Michael is here.
All right, bring that fella on.
You need to unmute, dear. There you go.
Now can you hear me?
Can hear you now.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
Loud
and clear, buddy.
And now I have to unmute. I had to do something.
Welcome, Michael.
All these great stories, and it's like just about everybody before me on this panel started way ahead of me. Was way behind. I was folk dancing from about, seriously from about 1961 at Folk Dance House with Marianne and Michael Herman. Both my parents had been folk dancers. I had a little bit of experience with folk dancers before I actually took it up seriously. And, it was international folk dancing, stuff from all over. And, before I really understood that where things came from, it turned out that my favorite dances were from the Balkans. I was tickled by odd rhythms. It just tickled something in me. It was so pleasing. I kind of understood it immediately and internalized it very, very quickly. It was, I just thought it was so tickling because my experience had been with 3/4 time and 4/4 time. So I took piano lessons at an early age, and I started to play the trumpet in junior high school. And my first musical experience with folk dance music, Balkan music, was actually with a group called the Free Reeds, referring to the accordion, which is a free reed instrument. It was me and Michael Alpert and Mary Kate Brass and Vicky Gould. So everybody played the accordion. We played a little bit for folk dancing. But the free reeds kind of didn't last very long. Vicky moved away and got into contra dancing, and so did Mary Kay. Um, so in 1982, I think it was, the EEFC decided to expand to the East Coast and started right near Woodstock. Started a camp there, and I heard about it, and so I was playing the accordion, and a guy named Lyubin Tachev was teaching the accordion. So I brought my accordion, and I saw that there was going to be a brass band class. So I dusted off my trumpet that had been in the closet for 20 years since high school, brought it to camp. My main interest was taking accordion with Lyubin, but the brass band class turned out to be of great interest. There were a lot of people like me in that class who also had dusted off their instruments and were playing for the first time in many, many years. And it was at that time it was a 10-day camp, so we had a lot of time together. So the first day of brass band class, Stuart Menon, who was the teacher of the class, came with about four cartons of paper that turned out to be what they call charts. To me, I never heard the word chart referred to sheet music, but they call them charts. And the charts, most of them were handwritten, and were almost completely black because there were so many notes in them. And, I hadn't played the trumpet in years. I remembered the fingering. I could play the first octave, but getting anywhere higher than that was tough. So we played, and the class was just reading through these charts. And for the first 9 days of camp, our sound was basically noise. But the last day of camp, the brass band was in charge of the entertainment for the night. So we were the dance band, and the only dance band for the dance that night. And the people who were on staff who had experience with this kind of music sat in with us. And all of a sudden, what had been noise all week became music. And the folk dancers on the East Coast had never experienced dancing to this kind of music before. And the response was wildly enthusiastic. I mean, loud cheering. It's like I had never experienced that before. Incredible enthusiasm, energy between the musicians and the dancers just flowing back and forth. It was like just a treat to play that kind of music and have that kind of response. And
yep. So Michael, yeah. Thank you for that part. You will be back to talk, more about the band and where you evolved after that. But so many of us had that experience. I mean, with Stuart Menon, and when he was introducing it was basically like a junior high school band or something. The charts, you just read them, but the energy, the magic that happened that last night. Oh, yeah, it's all about that. So again, I'll get back to you more later. Right now, let's move to the post-band kind of a perspective, starting with Henry Goldberg again, if Henry is still here and available. Ready to...
And Lane wanted to add something really quick on Origins, if we can squeeze it in.
He could do that when he comes back. I don't think we need to necessarily interject now. He and Drew will be back, and that would be fine to intermix things a little bit that way.
Okay.
Well,
okay.
We're not twins. Yeah, you should let Link.
Okay, so we'll come back to Drew and Lane a little bit later, actually, in this session, okay? And you're welcome to reprise a little bit. I mean, you kind of went forward and back, so it's all good, okay? But right now, let's move to Henry, okay?
Here I am. Here I am, Bill. What would you like?
To talk more about Evonas, for instance, and David Belides and the folks who participated. This is really around the band and how the band, how you got gigs and how well you worked together and, how it got started and how. I'd like to know how bands end also, if people would talk about that. Unfortunate,
How much time do you have? Anyway, so Evonas, as I mentioned earlier, that we started in 1975. And we started to play for dancing, and it was not without controversy. There was already playing for the, our established folk dances. Not everyone wanted live music. People liked their records, and we didn't have the scratch at the right place when we were playing Tritti Putti, or we didn't play the right tune or whatever. So it was not without controversy at the time.
And people actually expressed this to you. They told you what they thought.
Well, they didn't.
That was a joke.
No, but they told the organizers. They expressed it in public. We heard. I will say Jane Wyman was a force in folk dancing at that time in Boston, and she was a big booster of live music. We played mostly for dancing, but we also played at festivals. When we started, we were flexible, perhaps, in the music that we played. So there was a TV personality, Theoni Mark, who had a Greek cooking program on the local PBS station, and she wanted us to play Greek music. So we said, okay. And we embarked on learning Greek music. We also went through a tamburitsa phase. So in addition to schlepping, the gaita and all the Beethoven instruments, we had to schlep around the santuri, and we had to schlep around the bass and the tamburitsas, and it was a big production. Yes.
And Sophia, when you mention Greek in that area, I think of Sophia Boulidis. I mean, that amazing voice of hers.
Yes. Sophia Boulidis was in the Evonas at the beginning. She eventually left, and part of it was because she wanted to have a career as a Greek singer, and she started a band, and she could not be seen with a band that was playing this other music that they called Macedonian. So she had to go off on her own.
I remember that. That's why I wanted to ask.
So anyway, the picture behind me is Evonas in 1977. I hope that works. You'll see David Boulidis with his big hair. I'm on the left with less beard. There's Janice Darling and Joan Goodmoon, our singer. And then that's Marlise Kraft is second from the right. Who would have known? And then that's Ken Mazer, a local. It's not, sorry, Mark, it's not Frank Dubinskas.
Who's the young guy with the tupan?
Some young guy.
Okay.
He was told play, so he played. Anyway, so we played for a variety of events in Boston, both for folk dancers in various contexts, and occasionally for other people who just wanted the ethnic music. And we played until 1990, which is when David moved to California. I don't know why anyone would want to move to California, but he did. And so we had a couple of reunion performances after that when he came back for a visit. But that was basically at the end of that band. And out of the ashes, some of the people who had entered Evonas at that point started up a different band with Martha Forsyth called Stravitz, and they still are operating today.
Wonderful, Henry. Thank you very, very much for that.
I want to say one thing. One thing is EEFC in 1980, after they started up Ashokan, the East Coast camp, and almost went bankrupt, they wanted us to have this month of Balkan music, ask people around the country, and we started our Balkan Music Night, which continues till today. And it was designed to support and provide a showcase for local bands. So a lot of local bands got a lot of exposure there.
And when is that event this year, Henry?
It's on February 28th, 2026 in Somerville, Mass. You go to balkanmusicnight.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Henry. Dan Kolar, if you would, I'd like to welcome you back. And, talking about Novo Selo, I mean, that band was very significant in my early Balkan experiences. And I hope that you could tell us something about that and anything else that crosses your mind that would be of interest to the group. Dan?
He's coming.
Okay.
I see him.
Geez, there's so much. Novoselo evolved out of that group that I mentioned earlier of musicians, both in Philadelphia and in Princeton. And I lived in between at the time. And what would happen is I would host the musicians from Philly and Princeton at my place, and we would party and play music together. And it evolved into the fact that the Philly group liked more Croatian Serbian, and we in the Princeton group liked more Macedonian. And that group in Princeton was Jim Finn, myself, and Jay Maynard at the time. So what would happen is we separated so that we could focus on each of those musics. And at the end of the evening, well, the Princeton people met at my place, the people in Philly stayed in Philly. And at the end of our evening, we would make a phone call to each other and play over the phone what we had been rehearsing and playing. So
really,
it was just lots of fun. Yeah, that's
a real phone.
What's that?
This would have been a real phone. Where you had to hold it up, a Bakelite thing.
The old real phone. My phone bills were really amazing at the time. Anyway, eventually Jay Maynard moved on, and I'm gonna jump way ahead here. Is we heard about Alan. He jumped it both ways. He liked doing the tamburica kinds of stuff, and then he took over for Jay playing tambura with us in Princeton. And we would go back and forth in both folk dance groups playing live and for parties as much as we could. Eventually, Eran Frankel, we heard, was coming to Philadelphia, and we connected with him, again, trying to make this quickly here. And Jim Finn, Eran Frankel, myself, and Alan got tighter around the Macedonian music. Eran said, "Hey, I know Mile Kolarov." And that's a long story there, but eventually we brought Mile over, and then a dance group in Philadelphia and workshops and all kinds of things evolved there. I'm going to jump way ahead where we did all kinds of things thanks to the wonderful folk dance community enveloping us and wanting us to come play around the nation, so to speak. And we just had a blast. And eventually people moved on. By 1990, we dissolved because I think Eran went to California or Jim did. We fulfilled ourselves.
Yes, life takes you in different directions unexpectedly. Thank you so much, Dan. I really, really appreciate your stories and perspective. Carol Freeman, you were talking about some of the bands that you worked with?
I was talking about James Profession. And I don't really know when we stopped performing. We're all still...
Louder, Carol.
We're all still very connected. Hear me?
Yes, much better.
After a couple of us got into doing Yiddish music, for me, I landed a job in 1977 where the city, New York City, opened up 500 jobs for artists. There were over 10,000 applicants. I waited online for 3 days to submit my application, and I landed a job to be a Yiddish singer. And that has continued. The last 4 years, I actually have been a New York State master folk artist in Yiddish balladry. But of course, we have not stopped with Balkan music, which is our first passion. For me, after Ženska Pesna, I became A solo singer with an ensemble. We started out doing Zmirovnaya, which is, for those who don't know, it's sort of music of Asia Minor Greeks from the 1920s and 30s. And I worked with community members. I did not work with other American musicians, but I worked with people from the ethnic communities themselves and did that for a couple of decades. Now, basically, I'm mostly, not entirely mostly working as a solo singer on accompanied balladry. Um, and I think for Lauren, she's been working mostly playing accordion, a Yiddish accordion. But she and Michael work together doing old Bulgarian stuff. But I have to say that I've actually never had another job. I've only been doing music all these years. So,
Wow.
well, I'm poor. I'm not rich. But
Oh,
that's
your soul is rich. Your soul is rich, if I may.
I've probably taught. I'd say over 1,000 people in terms of teaching something, and I'm
Amazing.
still doing that. And it's really, I mean, thank God for that. I don't know how I would have survived and would be surviving the mess we're in now without it. It's really kind of takes you away. To be able to share something that you love so much with other people is really a privilege.
Thank you, and I think that's a perfect wrap up for what you're talking to us about. Jerry Kisslinger, talk about you still playing rock and roll?
No, the Lugnuts did disband, but I'm involved with a number of other groups playing Balkan music. I think it would be interesting to highlight when I came to New York and in the East Coast part of this, and call out the Balkanizers, which was a group that was formed as early as 1980. So I'd come here to go to college. I was just getting out of college. I was in graduate school, and I met up with David Skews, who many of you know from chapters in the Bay Area, both before and after he lived in New York. David was originally from Sacramento. He was in the People's International Silver String Orchestra with Nada and others on the West Coast, and then he came east to study with Sam Chianis in Binghamton, and then at Columbia in ethnomusicology. So he formed a band with myself and a number of other musicians, including Karen Whitman and other folks that you know. And we would play again starting around 1981. Started to play for folk dancing. Started to play busking. We would get Jewish gigs because there really weren't that many klezmer bands on the street, and we got some weddings and this and that. I will say we too played a variety of folk dance music, and we had the experience of kind of breaking live music into that scene. And when the value was, you guys were great tonight. You sounded just like the record. That's the highest praise that people could. And it was a compliment. I understand that, but we hadn't got to the point which I think we've all evolved to, where there's an advantage when the live music can take off and go beyond the record. So, but we were pleased to be able to do it. David was a wonderful violinist, and what that led to was playing. And I want to shout out Buffalo Gap Camp and Larry Weiner and his bringing acceptance of live music, and it was really a struggle that was worked out in real time between only records or only live music. It was a compromise, but we were a band there for many years with David Belides, with Charlie Pilzer in Washington, David Skews, and a few others of us would go down, Karen Whitman and a few others. So Buffalo Gap was hugely important for my development because I got to play with really great dance teachers. I remember when Bill and you all came out too and played at Buffalo Gap. And then, it was that was around 1983 is when all this was happening. And when I started going to Macedonia, and it was Larry's camp that connected me with Petse Atanasovsky, who came to teach. And I had the experience of both being schooled positively,
Good word
That's
choice.
great.
Good word choice.
Yeah, which was great to learn from the master. And so that led to my traveling in the Balkans and so on. And then I think the next chapter really has to do with Walt Mahovlich came along and I played with him in wonderful combinations, but also Zlatan Uste and Gypsy Cab, which we can talk about in a later segment.
Perfect. So let's see here. Let's bring Drew and Lane back on, okay? Because they had something they want to refer to from earlier. But let's try and hold it to 2 to 3 minutes, gentlemen, okay?
I just wanted to backfill a little bit on. So Drew and I started in Pensacola, Florida. It is not noted as one of the cultural hubs of the universe, and so we were really in a wilderness in that regard. We had a woman that inspired us, and she had gone over to study with Petse and brought back instruments. We saw those. Let me back up just real quick. My uncle Vance played saxophone, and he was the coolest guy on the planet when we were kids. And we all wanted to be like him. And Drew was the only one that actually got a sax. We had a trumpet in the family, so I became the trumpet player. I was the oldest brother. But he brought home Dave Brubeck. And that was the first time we heard something that wasn't in 2 or 3. And it just blew, it's like Take 5, Blue Rondalla, Turk, and that. And we were like 6 or 7. Now we didn't get any more of that for another 15 years, nearly. And when we started playing, trumpet was an instrument non grata. Nobody wanted to hear trumpet. It was all guided, clarinet and stuff. Drew got a guide, and he had a clarinet. I made a drum. A friend gave me, well, I watched him and helped him string a drum, and then I convinced him to give me 2 heads, and I went back to Pensacola and built the drum and played it for years. Another piece, I wanted to make a gaita. So I made a deal with one of the guys in the junkyard where the goats kept the grass down around the cars in the junkyard, but they get into antifreeze and other things and die. And I had a deal where he would call me when the goat died, and I'd come over there and skin it and bring the horns and the head and the skin back and see if I couldn't try to make a gaita out of the damn thing. I just want to put a little framework about how freaking primitive we were and coming from nothing. I just want to put that in there. And just a complete little side note, somebody mentions Vitz Beleas. He's a guy, he started teaching in the United States at the high school my mother was in, the Marietta Johnson School of Organic Education in Fairhope, Alabama, and started Viltus at that to stay in touch with the service members who were in World War II. Just a little side note. I never met Vitz myself, but my mother took classes with him.
Wow.
So anyway,
Appreciate it very much. Thanks.
A little about the wilderness that we came from.
I appreciate it. Yes, I could tell some stories like that too. So let's bring Dave Goldberg back, please. And everybody's aware that we have limited time for stories that we could tell for days.
I'll be real quick.
Dave?
So, like a bunch of time in Los Angeles playing with Amon. I was instrument czar at the West Coast camp for 9 years. And then, God, by now it's 30 years ago, and I said, I don't want to, well, there was enough money, and I'd had no dependents, and I took an early retirement and came here and studied to Boston area and studied violin making. And so I'm also making actually Norwegian fiddles, and every once in a while I get some kind of job doing something with Balkan instruments. I had 2 people bring in Godulkas. I won't say the words. What an instrument. Working on
we all hear the word, even if you don't say it, Dave, okay?
Yeah, okay. And so at some point, I ended up playing with this group of about, I think there were about 8 of us, called Rakia. They're still in existence. After a while, I dropped out of that, and we started up this little. At the beginning, it was a trio: me and Henry, and one of an accordion player. We called ourselves Gogovsky because there were 2 G's and an F. And after a while, we finally found a singer, and so now we are no longer trio. and we play a little bit here, a little bit there, and not as much as I'd like. And I'm not playing weirdo instruments anymore, just clarinet. What else do you want to know? Do you want to know about the excursion to Norway?
Show them your hurdy, Billy Day.
Okay, hey, I gotta.
Okay.
Let's show.
This won't take long.
What?
So, this is what I make these days. Yes, and yeah.
Get it in focus.
It's okay. What do I do? Yeah. So this is a hard
All
one.
right.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow. Beautiful, beautiful work, Dave.
Yeah.
Beautiful work. Thanks very much. And let's bring Jane Sugarman back on now.
Wow, that's a hard act to follow. Well, I haven't. The only band I was ever really in was the Middle Eastern band at UCLA when I was a student, which I.
Well, even sorry, Jane. One of the things that I'm interested in from you is the academic path that you decided to pursue. In the last segment, you talk about winding up discovering ethnomusicology at UCLA and what that kind of meant. And since you're teaching people about, in the field of ethnomusic, I mean, how did that build other bands or other relationships or other interests? That.
Yeah, so I'm one of several people from the Balkan scene. It is really true that almost every major scholar of the Balkans started as a folk dancer. Even people like Catherine Verdery, the #1 anthropologist, Ronnie Alexander, the linguist, just on and on. We all started as dancers. Gail Kligman, who's a sociologist. I had a kind of varied career because I thought I was going to do Bulgarian music. I took Bulgarian for 3 years with Mark Levy at UCLA. And then I met Edon Frankel, and we ended up going to Macedonia. So then I had to really, as quickly as possible, switch over to Macedonian so I didn't insult people. And then we just gradually got to know Albanian families. And I eventually ended up doing my doctoral research on Albanian immigrants in the Great Lakes area. And so my connection to the Balkan scene really was mostly as a teacher. So I was at the very first West Coast Mendocino camp. I taught beginning Godulka, of all things. And then, because I spent a couple of years there as a Godulka player. And then I taught Bulgarian singing, I taught Macedonian singing, I taught Albanian singing. And I just wanted to give a real quick shout out to Balkan Arts in New York with Marty and Ethel, because I think the East Coast people were really influenced by that. And they were working with the immigrant communities, including the Albanian community, which they had very good relations with, and the Greek musicians and the Tamburitsa musicians in Chicago and everybody. But so over the years, I taught all those things at the camps. And then when Merita Halili came from Albania, I was kind of her assistant for maybe 5 years teaching. So academically, so more and more I'm an academic. And in the summers, I tend to be traveling and going to the Balkans or going to diaspora sites. And so as an ethnomusicologist, I have to be a generalist. There's no way I could just teach about the Balkans. So in fact, I haven't taught all that much about the Balkans. I taught a lot of Middle Eastern music. When I taught undergraduates, I teach a lot of methodology and basically what's ethnomusicology like, how do you do research? So I have had one student who was Albanian American and wrote his dissertation on popular music in Albania, and he's now a professor in Australia. But my other students, one of them researched music of the Jewish community of Istanbul. Another two researched Jewish communities in Brooklyn. One of them two students worked in Senegal, one student worked in Oman. And then you try to teach, put all that together and teach it to students. So for 18 years, I taught a lot of undergraduate students. And that's really important because they don't know much about the world. they can't find most countries on a map. So music can be a really great way to get people to learn about the world. Um, and I try to be a helpful person on the EEFC list and answer people's questions about things, but that's really been my role.
Just a couple of quick questions, and you know, we can't all cross paths with everybody, but a couple of people that I'm curious if you cross paths with in the music area, Tim Rice and
sure.
Elsie Dunnan.
Well, Elsie, I wasn't in Elsie's group at UCLA because I was a good little music student. I was doing like Indonesian music one night and African xylophone the next night, and I was in Mark's Balkan group. But I was Elsie's research assistant for a while. She was looking into how folk dance had been taught in California and particularly Macedonian dance. So I went through years and years of Let's Dance magazine and all these things looking for every syllabus for a Macedonian dance that I could find. And that was really great because Petse came to visit her and George Tomov came to visit. And especially with Petse, I got to speak with him quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
He and Mile were on the outs, so when we were in Macedonia, there was no way that we could go and talk to Petse.
Oh, believe me, I know about that. Yeah, that kind of thing. I mean, I was there too. So thank you so much for that. And now our closing segment.
Just a little bit about Tim Rice is another one who started.
Oh, sure,
dancing.
please, yes.
And
Yes.
I knew him in Toronto when I was doing my research with the Albanians. He was in a Macedonian band with folks from northern Greece. And then when he tried to go to Bulgaria to visit his mentor there, they wouldn't let him in the country. I think it was because he was working with Macedonians. I mean, this is welcome to the Balkans. It's always fun. And then I saw him, of course, at UCLA in my final years. So he's another person who started with dancing and playing.
Yep. Anyway, an amazing community. Just trying to get everybody. Okay, so thank you so much, Jane. I'm so glad you joined us, and a big thank you to everyone who's spoken so far. And now for the closing segment, I'd really like to hear from Michael and Jerry and Sherry, in particular about Zlatni Uste. You know, it may be the longest living Balkan band, certainly in the United States, and how he's managed to keep that band together. I'd love to hear whatever you've got to say, including everything that you might want to keep behind the curtain, Michael.
Okay, I'm on. Yeah. So I have to mention Jerry Kisslinger and Drew and Lane have shared a lot of these experiences with me. It's a big story. I've spent, hours at Culture Corners talking about it. So like 2-3 minutes isn't going to do anything justice. So what I'd like to focus on is probably the biggest
You've got
thing.
You've got 7 minutes, buddy.
I got 7 minutes. So let me start with the biggest thing that happened to us. And that was our trip to Serbia in 1987. So Drew and Lane and Marion all talked about Gucha for a long time. We had this idea about, going at some point, bringing the band to Gucha, and we had no idea how to do that. We had several recordings, actually there were tape recordings mostly, of Serbian brass bands. We actually tried to learn from these recordings a bit. But anyway, George Tomov, who's had an dance ensemble in New York City, invited us to play for a concert at the Riverside Church. This was 1986. And so we played for one of his suites, and we played a little bit during costume change. And at the intermission, I walked out into the lobby, and George was talking to a guy named Dusan Simic, who was the New York representative for the publication Politika in Belgrade, which is the New York Times of Serbia. And so we started talking, and I said to Mr. Simic, I said, our band has heard about Gucha for a long, long time. And we would, love to go there at some time. Do you have any idea how that could happen? And his response, I'll never forget, was, "There will be no problem. They will love you." And so, out of the blue, I had no idea what do you mean? He said, "Oh, my colleague is the editor in chief of Ilustrovna Politica. This is the life magazine of Serbia, and they sponsor the festival in Guja. I will telex him, and I'm sure they will invite you." Okay. So we go home, and I have this in my head, and I kind of forget about it because it's many, many weeks later that I open the mailbox, and there's a letter from return address Ilustrovna Politica. Open the letter. "Dear Mr. Ginsburg, we invite you to Gucha. We will fly you on yacht. We will put you up in Hotel Moskva. Then we will, take you by bus on a little tour and take you to the festival. You'll spend a few days there. Then we'll take you back and fly you back on yacht." So all of a sudden, this sort of fantasy became something that was going to be a reality. I couldn't wait to tell the band. It was like, wow, look, they're not only are they, inviting us, they're paying for us to come. And so, after a little bit of wrangling and negotiating, whatever, we finally got everybody on the same plane to travel from New York to Belgrade. And it's on yacht, Yugoslav Airlines. And we leave 4 hours late from Kennedy, and we arrive 4 hours late in Belgrade. And the door to the jetway opens, and music's coming into the plane. Brass band music's coming into the plane. I'm sitting next to Jerry, and I'm flabbergasted. Then I turned to him. I said, "That's for us." We go out into the jetway, and the music is, my first impression of the live band is it's very loud. They're in the jetway, right? They're in the jetway, and we're coming out to the jetway, and the band is at the opening to the terminal. They're playing in the jetway, and we're sort of brought off to the side as the passengers from the plane are escorted out and go into the terminal. And you see the passengers are kind of looking around, where's the king? Is the king here? Why is there a brass band playing in the jetway? Anyway, so we were brought down into the tarmac, and our instruments were brought to us from the plane, and we were there, and the Perisic Orchestra was there to greet us, and we were lined up in kind of like a V, and we're supposed to play some things together, and we managed to do something. We didn't really have a large repertoire and had very little in common, but we shared something, and every publication in Serbia was there, and every TV station was there, taking pictures, and we became the Dragachevsky is New York, the New York brass band. Anyway, the experience was very formative for the band. We were all there. We got to hear together what a brass band looked like, what it sounded like, how it interacted with its audience. It was amazing. I mean, I could talk for a long, long time about that. I don't have much time. But anyway, that was a very formative experience. On the way home, several of us stopped at the music store in Belgrade and actually bought the same kind of instruments that we saw brass bands playing in Serbia. At the time, we had an accordion, a trombone, a clarinet. I forget. Maybe I was the only trumpet player. Maybe there were two. And we saw, oh my God, these. Emerson bought a tuba like the ones that they play, and Mac Francis bought two baritone horns for him and Michelle, and anyway, everybody was so involved in it and got so into the sound. Anyway, we got home, and our first rehearsal after we got home was a different band. People had been practicing, like we had a brass section, a mid brass section that sounded like what we'd heard in Serbia. we it was like unbelievable transformation. So anyway, it was a wonderful idea for us to go. It was a wonderful experience for us to go and come back. Um, and there are other formative experiences as well, but probably that's the largest one.
Thank you, Michael. And we're just at the end of our session. And wasn't there a video or movie made? Is that of the history of Zlatny Uste?
Called Brasslands, and the movie
Brasslands.
was to actually it was originally going to be about Zlatny Uste. This media group heard about us, wanted to make a movie. They started following us around for a couple of years, taking videos of gigs and stuff like that. And then we got invited to participate in the first international competition in Gucha, 2010.
Yeah, my only question there, Michael, is it available for folks who are attending here? Is it available for them to watch someplace today?
I don't know. They can buy it.
Okay.
You can get it on Amazon, I'm pretty sure. But if you Google,
okay.
If you Google, you can find it. It's easy to find.
It's called Brasslands. Right. Brasslands.
Wonderful.
It's a great opportunity to see Michael Ginsberg doing his laundry.
Yeah, right. and shaving.
But not you, Jerry?
No.
Okay. Again, just closing, thank you to everyone. This was amazing. Thank you for working within the timeline that was allotted. Such a pleasure, such a joy. I mean, I can't describe. I mean, I have goosebumps just from being able to see so many friends over so many years who are still passionate. It's an amazing community, and I can't wait for every opportunity to play music together, for live dancers, all of that. And Sherry, I guess you should do the closing.
Okay. Well, just briefly, we were going to talk about Life Camp, and that can be another conversation.
Oh, shoot.
So just real quickly, I met Michael at Idlewild Camp in the late 80s. We got to be friends. He came out and did a bunch of workshops that I set up for him in Los Angeles. We're at a coffee shop talking about, the live music experience, which was very big for me. I had always tried to have live bands when I had classes at the intersection and all of that. And Idlewild ended up folding and gave me some seed money to do something. And I talked to Michael about it, and he said, okay, let me tell you about Golden Festival. Take it away, Michael. You convinced me I could do this.
I don't know how I convinced you, but what do you want me to say about it, Sherry?
Well, why did you think that we could do this? We bring 12 members of Zlatny Uste from the East Coast to the West Coast, and other musicians too. Tamar Seaman, George Chittenden, Dan Oval, 3 teachers. We didn't have a lot of money. Everybody was very generous with their time, and we pulled it off. And it was the first all live music camp in Southern California. We had Balkan Camp in the north, but all the classes were to live music. That was my vision and your vision, and we did it.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that I knew there would be no problem having Zlatny Uste come out to do it. One of our early conversations as a band was about money. We knew that none of us was going to add any significant income from playing this kind of music, and that we were in it for the experience, and the experience of going to Southern California to play at a camp. I knew everybody would eat it up, and that so that wasn't an issue. Yeah.
If I just might add, it's not the experience; it's the sheer absolute joy experience. Yes. Yeah, but it's really the joy.
I remember, one thing we did at Life Camp was, Drew's really kind of a very creative guy, Drew and Lane. So we brought made up some money with Dick Crum as on the face of the money.
No, we had real money.
I went and got $200 in cash of my money to do this.
Okay. Anyway, Drew taught people, gave a workshop at this camp about
On how to tip.
how to give money to musicians.
Well, not just
Basically,
how to relate to musicians and dance. It goes back to what he said about dancing. We're playing;
Yeah.
it's an interactive
Yeah.
thing.
We set all the
They were
people.
all running away from us.
Yeah, we set them all down on the tables with piles of U.S. dollars and said,
And wine.
and wine, and taught them how to enjoy it.
Well, you'll see a little clip of that in the next segment because I have a couple of videos that we're going to show. One of them is a taste of Life Camp 1994, which was the first year when we did this, and the tipping workshop is in there, and a lot of the musicians who were on the panel are in there. And then the second video is clips from several years of Golden Festival, including this year. So,
when we're done with announcements, which one would you like to show first?
let's do Life Camp. It's the older one.
So just to say, I have to say goodbye because I need to get back to rehearsing for Orchestra Unbound's 2 sets yet tonight. Take care. Thank you so much.
And I just want to say, the conversation doesn't have to end here. We hope to continue it in the future through a folk chat and community gatherings or at Stockton again. So, thank you very much to all the panelists and all the participants. And please stay with us today if you're interested in watching some videos of fabulous musicians having fun.
Thank you so much.
Cricket. Let's see here. Who's on? Yeah. 5. Let's see. It is me. Look at that. All right. So here we go. It is shift change time. Let me pull up my little magic Zoom window here. Thank you, friends. Marvelous time. Marvelous.